Yes, hello everyone. This is the COVID-19 news channel, and I just wanted to give a summary of the latest news going on related to the coronavirus. It's looking like this is nothing more than a pretty bad flu. What started out as looking like a serious pandemic that was going to kill millions of people around the globe turns out that it hasn't actually been as serious as I guess was at first believed. But what it's morphed into now is that it's morphed into sort of this new system that we have, which is everyone must wear a mask, everyone must social distance, everyone must do this and must do that. So it seems to be that the pandemic itself, as far as the medical situation, is such that it was a bad flu, and certainly for people with pre-existing some sort of debilitating condition to begin with, it's certainly a dangerous thing. But for most people, most people didn't even have any symptoms. So, but in spite of that, and in spite of the fact that most countries have reopened and schools have opened in most countries, it still seems that we're still feeling the effects of this coronavirus, and it's still in the news that it's this horrible illness, and it seems to be it's morphed into more of a social control mechanism. If I can, at risk of sounding paranoid or something like that, it seems to be that governments and public officials and bureaucrats, technocrats, people of that nature are very reluctant to give up the power that the COVID-19 scare has given them. So we're feeling the residual effects of what was really not that dangerous, I guess, of a medical condition. Wasn't as virulent as as people thought. Millions of people are going to die around the globe, we originally heard, and it didn't turn out to be that bad. Certainly, a lot of people did die, and it seems like around 40 to 50% of them were older people in homes, where they sent COVID positive people into nursing homes or places where there's a lot of old people, which seems to just defy any logic that you can possibly imagine. Though it did happen, that was a reality. But there's another issue that needs to be brought in addition to the social control that we're fighting now. That the the residual effects of the COVID-19 is the social control that we're facing now from centers of authority. Power centers that we're facing now. That is the real threat. The more than the virus itself. In addition to the economic impact, the fact that a lot of people have lost their jobs, many businesses have gone out of business because of the lockdown, which is even worse much worse than the virus itself, as many people predicted to begin with. So this is the actual ancillary effects, or the residual effects of COVID-19 I think are obviously much worse than actually the impact of the virus itself, which in many places was, as it turns out, was not any worse, or was about equal to the normal deaths from a normal flu season. Because a lot of people, thousands of people do die from the ordinary flu, from very bad flu every year, which is something we seem to have overlooked. And COVID grabbed all this attention when, there are thousands of people that die every year from the flu, from a very bad flu. Young people, old people. And COVID-19 actually turned out to not be as bad as that in many cases, as an ordinary, really bad flu season. So, where do we stand now? We're all wearing masks, and we're social distancing and all this stuff, and we have to obey this and obey that, and this store can't open and that can't open. It's and many places have gone out of business, and I mean, how many people have lost their lives? How many people have succumbed to drug addiction, alcohol addiction, abuse, in the home, for being stuck in a home, different things, I mean, what the residual effects, are much worse than this this virus, which turns out to be not even as bad as an ordinary flu, or perhaps equal to it in some cases, in some countries, in some regions. So, I mean, what are we looking at here? The fight now is not against the virus anymore. The fight is against, the economic impact, the impact on our lives, the impact on our families, on ordinary people, as an ancillary effect, as an effect of the virus, an unexpected consequence or something like that, So this is where we stand now, which is and given the fact that in addition to the fact that you have governments and bureaucrats and public officials, public authorities, and things like that are unwilling to give up their power, and all of a sudden they have all this power to tell you they can open this, but you can't open this business, you can open that business, but you can't open this business, you can sit on the beach, you can't sit on the beach, You have to be, some countries it's, you have to be 1 meter apart, so many feet apart. In other countries, it's got to be 6 feet or whatever, 6 feet or 2 meters or 2 yards or whatever it is, I mean, it's just ridiculous. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason. Some countries are open, some countries never shut down at all, and they're fine. They seem to be doing all right. They have their cases. Everyone has their cases of coronavirus. Okay, so that being said, that's one point I wanted to make. Another point I think it's important to make is the fact that it's looking very much like China released this virus either through negligence or deliberately. If we just look at the facts, you have to look at the fact first of all that China is a communist country, a Marxist-Leninist country. Okay. And what does Marxist-Leninism believe? It believes in overthrowing the world through violent revolution. That is one of the primary principles of Marxism. If you've ever read any of Marx's writings, it's violent overthrow of the world. That's what it is. I mean, you can sugarcoat it or whatever you want to say about equality, and it's all about fairness, and sharing everything or whatever. I mean, come on. I mean, we're not children. It's about violent overthrow of society through violence, And this virus was released at a time when China was really in bad shape. It was economically in bad shape because of tariffs from the United States, and it was suffering in many ways. And China had many problems at the time the virus was released, and this, because of the virus, it's looking like China was, I mean, maybe they didn't do it deliberately, maybe it was by accident, but I mean, it seems pretty clear from what, from research papers that were written at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, that these scientists were engineering coronaviruses. They were engineering coronavirus. There were papers written, research papers written by their top researchers there, by in particular a woman, she was working. She was called Batwoman, Bat Lady, Batwoman, and she was working on coronaviruses from bats. She harvested bats. It didn't come from the wet market. She harvested bats in very far from the lab, 500, 600 miles from the lab. And she was working on these viruses with with a very specific type of protein on the outside of the virus itself, which would penetrate human cells and would be able to infect human cells, which normally bat viruses aren't able to do. So there it is. You happen to have a lab that was manufacturing, engineering coronaviruses from bats that could penetrate, that had a special protein, adaptation, gain of function, that could penetrate human cells and infect human cells and basically take over human cells. And it was released to the world. So by a country that was in very dire straits, or was in dire straits in quite a few ways due to either economic difficulties caused by the United States, possibly military difficulties, possibly Xi Jinping was in trouble because of this. Was he politically in trouble because of the economic problems with China, and unable to bring the United States to heel as far as putting China in a more advantageous economic position in terms of trade and whatnot. And you add to that you have to remember China is a communist country. Never forget that. Even the Jack Ma, of Alibaba is a member of the Communist Party. You have to be a member to do business in China. And what does communism believe? Let's look at what communism believes. If you just look at Karl Marx's writings, violent overthrow. It's not a peaceful. It seems to be obviously people that have never read Marx, sort of have this idea that Marxism is this perfect system of equality for the proletariat, where everyone lives in peace and everyone shares everything. It's not even in Marx's writings is it like that. It's still a socially stratified society with basically three levels. You have your proletariat at the bottom, basically being pushed and shoved around by the managerial, technocratic, managerial class, and then you have the Politburo, or the upper class, which are basically very rich and they live in freedom. They do whatever they want. And they're extremely rich, and they have all the levers of power, and it's not a classless system. Marxism is not a classless system. It's still a system with classes. They're just different classes. It's not the capitalist classes, but there's still classes. Okay, it's not a classless society. There still are classes, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. As it relates to China, you're still talking about a society that believes in Marxist-Leninism, communism. And what does communism believe? It believes in violent overthrow of the entire world, global domination of the world through violent means, through violent overthrow in the world, which would certainly fall in line with, releasing a coronavirus when the world is when they're in trouble, when China was in a lot of trouble, politically, economically. Xi Jinping was in a lot of trouble because of the economic situation, the problems that he was having making trade deals with the United States, the fact that the Chinese economy was tanking. Then voila, abracadabra, out of nowhere, the coronavirus is released from China, from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and it sort of resets the balance. It just brings down the world economy, and especially the U.S. economy, and then voila, it sort of resets or retools the balance of power and in China's favor. And then what happens later? China is patrolling the Asian seas, threatening everyone, flying jets over Taiwan, invading Hong Kong. All of a sudden, the attention is off the Hong Kong protesters, and then China is just basically taking over Hong Kong, and just all these coincidences all of a sudden. So you really have to look at this in light of this coronavirus thing. There's just too many coincidences. There's no absolute smoking gun proof that China did this deliberately, that China released this virus deliberately. But circumstantial evidence points to the fact that it was either through extreme negligence, and China got really lucky, and it did sort of reset the world balance of power in their favor, or it was deliberately released. And like I said, there is research from the top researcher with the bat coronaviruses herself that she was working on these special viruses that with the special proteins on the surface of the coronaviruses that could penetrate human cells, which normally naturally occurring coronaviruses from bats were not able to do that. That's why she was doing the gain of function research on them, so they could do that. So just to summarize what I've been saying, what I'm trying to say in this video, to summarize my points. First of all, there's the fact that we have to deal with we all have to deal with the social control aspect of dealing with these centers of power, governments, bureaucrats, public officials, public organizations like the World Health Organization that are unwilling to give up this power that they've given themselves due to coronavirus, due to COVID-19. So the economic impacts have been just catastrophic. The impact on families, on the job markets, on economies around the world, catastrophic, on businesses. And it's the coronavirus itself is turning out not to be that bad. Coupled with the fact that the virus itself came from China, China did seem to benefit quite a bit from the coronavirus. Like I mentioned, Hong Kong, all the attention was off the Hong Kong protesters. They were able to crack down on Hong Kong. China was able to crack down on Hong Kong. They're flying jets over Taiwan. Suddenly they're patrolling all of the Asian seas, and threatening their neighbors, all the neighbors in Asia and Southeast Asia. I mean, come on, there's a lot of coincidences. And then couple that with the fact that, you have to look at China in the light of being a communist nation, a Marxist-Leninist country that, and what does Marxist-Leninism believe? It believes in violent overthrow, global domination through violent overthrow, okay, from a country that was in very dire straits, prior to all this COVID-19 at the beginning of the year and last year, the end of last year. So looking at all those things together, you have to kind of put them together, even though maybe there's no smoking gun. There is, if you put enough of the circumstantial evidence together, and then China's behavior immediately following COVID-19, you have to ask yourself, and just the fact that they covered it up, there was so much cover up, and then you have, even some of the researchers in the Wuhan Institute of Virology have disappeared. At least one or two of them have disappeared, and the website itself has been scrubbed like they never existed. Which is another typical feature of a communist or Marxist-Leninist system. Anyway, okay, so those are my thoughts on that, and so these are some things I feel that they're just going to be necessary in the future. Anyway, all right, so anyway, thank you very much for joining me, and if you have any information, and if you have any thoughts or comments you would like to share, questions you would like to ask, feel free. I'd be happy to hear your thoughts on this too. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful evening. See you next time.